Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up.
Totally. I think it depends when you have someone too. If someone's just scrolling, you're not really engaged. They're just looking for the first thing that catches their eye. But if I'm really seeking out something or I want to know more than beyond the headline, I'll seek out a long form piece of content because I actually want to read and understand, because headlines are catchy and that's what they're for, but they don't give you the full story. And that's where long form can really fill in those gray areas.
Hey marketers, we know you love a TLDR, so I'll get right to the point. You know Wix, the website builder with professional templates? Well, meet Wix Studio, made for freelancers and agencies with multiple clients. It has everything you need to efficiently build and operate campaigns across multiple channels. With Wix Studio, you can build websites that scale with dynamic pages and reusable assets, fast-track projects with integrations from Meta, Zapier, Google Ads, and more. Finish A/B testing in days, not weeks. Publish social content, send emails, optimize SEO, and so much more. Oh, and reporting is covered with integrations for tracking and analytics tools like GA4 and SEMrush. Basically, it's an all-in-one toolkit that scales with you. Drive real client growth with Wix Studio. Go to wixstudio.com. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Millennials podcast. Today, I have Jordana Klein. She has a cool background. One thing that stood out with me about it is she's really into tennis, and I'm really into tennis. And this is tennis and marketing colliding sounds like my dream right now. So I'm excited to chat all things marketing and sprinkle in a little bit of tennis. But I'll let Jordana give a little background how she got into marketing and her path, and then we'll get in the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much for the intro. I grew up playing tennis and volleyball, ultimately decided to pursue tennis and played Division I tennis for 4 years in college. Decided to kind of put my passions together, and I always loved writing. So I pursued a journalism degree and then ended up working for the USTA out of college. Left that role about a year after and kind of went back to the drawing board and again put all my passions together into a tennis travel blog that was called Tennis Itinerary. So I was basically traveling around mostly the Southeast and was writing about different tennis resorts and tennis venues. I was interviewing the directors, doing the social media, writing blog posts and reviews. And honestly, I loved it, but it just wasn't paying the bills. I did that for about 6 months, was doing a little bit of advertising, but wanted to kind of get my footing again and get a full-time role. So took a seasonal position at the Miami Open, which is owned by IMG, and ultimately ended up working at IMG Academy for over 6 years, which is under the same umbrella. That was like a dream role for me. I knew about it from being a kid in training. Left that a little over a year ago, and literally right as I left that role, I had a couple of people reach out who I had connected with from interviewing them back in my tennis itinerary days. And now I do freelance marketing for those same people. So even though my blog didn't make any money back in the day, it actually has come to fruition just in a whole nother light. So it's kind of a cool full circle moment.
All your experience came full circle with, obviously USTA, huge governing body, then IMG, which I didn't know did the Miami Open. That's cool to know that they did that. And then IMG Academy, which is probably the biggest feeder into professional tennis there is in the whole of the United States, maybe even the world. But it's pretty cool that this blog idea that just took your passion and your skill of writing came together and has given you a lot of jobs. But I want to go into something that you said is part of this role is
email marketing. How did you get into that space and learn email marketing from all these different roles?
Definitely. I owe that to my director at IMG Academy. So initially, I started working there in a sales role. It was actually a seasonal role, but I kind of took that as just my foot in the door. I wanted to just be there. That transitioned into a full time sales role and then into a full time marketing role, but it was ultimately more of a content role and more so in writing. About a year into being at the academy, they were looking for an email marketing manager externally, but they weren't able to find someone to fill that role. So they actually asked me if I was interested in taking that on. Aside from my personal inbox, I had no email marketing experience, but I gladly took that on as just another step in my career. It was only my second job out of college. And from there, I grew to love it. I grew to understand why short form writing was so influential versus the long form writing that I was actually used to. And because of my background in sports and being competitive and driven, when I sent an email and then seeing the sales that would come in that were directly correlated to that, I really just like took on that role and ran with it.
What are some of those components that made a great email in your perspective?
It's always evolving. It's always about testing too. I wouldn't say there's an exact formula, because if there was, then we would all have 100% conversion rates. But definitely subject lines are huge. Just getting that open is crucial, because if they're not willing to open your email, then you're not going to get any conversions and no one's going to read what you're writing. So the body doesn't even matter at that point. Um, Testing send times, send dates, things of that nature, and really personalizing the content. So if someone expresses interest in a certain subject, making sure that what you're sending them is actually related to that, because I know for me personally, I will unsubscribe if it's not related to what I'm interested in any longer in my inbox.
One thing I also think that probably made email marketing, what made great email marketing for you is one is you were an expert. You actually played tennis, so you can write like a tennis player to these to your target audience, trying to attract them. So not only that you know how to like send an email through an ESP that you're sending, but you can. I think one of the advantages that a lot of people don't do is speak in the language that their audience is, and you got to speak exactly how your audience speaks. And I bet that helped a lot of like conversion and open rates and all everything to do with your email marketing program.
Absolutely. Definitely at IMG, our target audience was mostly parents of competitive athletes, but also some athletes would sign up if they were interested in coming to our camps or the boarding school program. So I think being able to speak that language was definitely crucial. And then even now in some of my other roles with email marketing, just understanding what the client is seeking. And you can't just be salesy all the time. You have to be, we used to say you have to humanize the content. So making it relatable and making them actually passionate about it and kind of getting the buy-in from the consumer is key.
So what was the program like? Because you're marketing to parents. IMG Academy is one of the top private schools in the world that also has a boarding school as well. So what was the cadence of your emails like? How did you prepare? Did you have a content calendar? What was the content calendar? Was there specific dates that you were targeting, or was it I send every day or two times a week? What was that like?
It definitely evolved over time. I was in that email marketing role for over 5 years there. So when I took it on, it was kind of an open slate for me, which was actually a really cool project to take on. We had some of the bones, but I feel like I really took it and grew it. So we had a nurture campaign. So basically, if you signed up and you were interested in any of our products, we sent you about 5 or 6 emails that followed up with you and kind of explained what the program was. So if you were interested in tennis camps, it laid out the groundwork for that and kind of told you what set us apart. Or if you were interested in our boarding school for a different sport, it was personalized to that sport and that program. And then IMG Academy doesn't really run a ton of sales, but they had certain offers throughout the year that were maybe you would get a gift card, or they ran a new program called a camp pass, where you could kind of pay ahead of time and lock in the lowest rate. So definitely different seasonality based emails. And then on that same note, if we were running our summer camps versus our seasonal camps around the holidays, just things of that nature, or if there were different wins, like we had a lot of national team wins for several sports or different accomplishments. So just really promoting what was going on inside the campus, since it's kind of like an unknown. It's just such a cool place and atmosphere there.
Did you have to, before you were there, was did you know the interests of like the lists? For example, if a parent was coming in for a child that wanted to play soccer versus tennis, did that get put into different lists and then those send different emails, or how did that go to target interest based with your email program?
Yeah, behind the scenes, we had all of the different fields. So they were interest areas. So whether that was the product they were interested in or the sport, first name, last name, location, email, everything was in a different field. And then we were able to create different smart lists based on their interest areas.
What was the software you were using for that?
We used Adobe product called Marketo.
I'm very familiar with Marquetta. I'm very familiar
Yeah,
with Marquetta.
I grew to love it. It was a love-hate relationship for sure, but um, it's such an amazing tool. I don't use it anymore, but yeah, from time to time I miss it, which is honestly crazy that I say that now.
I mean, the automation capabilities of it is great. The UI is terrible, but at least it lets you do so many different things. Like if this person's in this list and they do this, then send this email, and all this different if then statements that you can make to make sure
Yeah.
that. But you don't really need it as a freelancer.
I left right before apparently there was a big upgrade where you can now visualize what your journey looks like, and it kind of looks like a flow. But when I was using the tool, it was all over the place.
Wow, they really come far. I mean, I used it probably 4 years ago, and it looked like Windows 98. So
Exactly. Yeah.
now I'm glad they're starting to step up their game and make it competitive to like HubSpot and uh, all those people. But it's cool to see that IMG Academy using a pretty powerful tool. So along with email marketing, were you writing all these emails too, was there a writer as well?
Yeah, it was all me. We had a fairly small team for such a big academy, but we were kind of a little mini agency in house. But as far as the email side, I did all of the copywriting and minimal design. We did have an in house design team. So I would work with the graphics team if I needed something. And they were really honed in on the brand. So if there was something running on social and the website, I tried to make the email mirror that, just for brand recognition and different campaigns that we were running. But yeah, it was, I wore a lot of hats for sure in that role.
Yeah, because I mean, it is for a lot of people, it's two different skill sets to run a marketing automation platform and writing emails. A lot of people just either run the marketing automation platform or the ops. They have a writer come up with the email and then you just plug it in.
I learned over time that potentially I could have been in four roles because I was front end and back end. I was writing, I did minimal design, but that was also something. And then I was also doing all of the like scheduling and the strategy behind it. And also I handled all of the campaigns. So not just the automations, but any of the one-off emails. I learned so much, but we were extremely busy.
I bet. I mean, I know just running a automation platform is hard in itself, and then if you have to writing takes time. But I bet your journalism background helped you at least write faster than like the average person who would write an email. So, what are some skills? Because journalism and writing emails are two different skill sets, like writing a blog versus writing an email. So, what do you say is the key differences of both, and what did you learn from writing emails to like improve email writing skills?
Definitely. Email is so short form, and it's always evolving. I think we're seeing attention spans dwindle probably as we speak. So my long form writing that I used to love writing paragraphs, that doesn't work in email. It doesn't translate well, especially when people are using mobile devices. So really shortening what I was writing and then probably even shortening it again because it's all about the headline and it's all about the CTA and the creative honestly, and then what's in between, people are skimming it but they're probably not fully reading it.
Yeah, that's actually such a good point. Like the three keys to the email that people spend actually the least time on, and they spend more time writing the meat of an email and less time actually perfecting the subject line, the headline, and the CTA. Those are like the three things that are going to keep people open, then keep their attention, and then the CTA is the most. Like you're trying to get someone to sell that when they open it, you're trying to sell the click. So get them to click as fast as possible is always the goal.
Definitely. And I actually used to play around with the from name, which I think a lot of brands or even companies don't even think about doing. It's always just from that company. But if I was sending something on behalf of the tennis program, I would change it and have tennis in the from name. So it wasn't just IMG Academy, it was IMG Academy Tennis. And I think that really clicked. And we saw a high open rate with the emails where people are used to seeing, a certain name in their inbox. But when you switch it up, I think it grabs their attention.
Yeah, two things on that. I mean, one, like that's targeting. So it's another way of targeting. Like instead of using the list, you can use the from name with the subject line. And two, it allows you to send more emails because if one's coming from IMG Academy or let's say the director at IMG Academy sends an email and then you just send an email from the tennis camp at IMG Academy. Those are three, you could send three different emails and people think it's not bombarding them if it's relevant to that list. So that from name is also a way to send more emails without people getting pissed off at you, pretty much.
Yeah, 100%.
One other question I have. So you manage marketing operations, basically, copywriting, campaigns. How did you, what's like a strategy you used? How did you manage all this stuff? How did you have like an Asana? Like what was the back end process to manage all these campaigns?
Thankfully, I had done it so many times year after year that it was very seasonal there, so I kind of knew what was coming, and the seasonality of the academy didn't change, but we did have an email marketing calendar specifically, that I ran honestly just out of a Google Excel sheet, and I actually still use a similar document for some other clients that I work with now. It just works for me. I do have experience using different project management software, and if it involved other groups or different parties on the team, I would absolutely use that just for the transparency piece and the tasks. And I love those tools, but since it was such a small group working on the emails, I just found that a calendar just worked best for me.
What's up, marketers? Time for a Wix Studio recap. Here are 5 things you can get done faster using Wix Studio. 1. Scale content with dynamic pages and reusable assets. 2. Integrate with Meta, Zapier, Google Ads, and more. 3. Launch and measure A/B tests with intuitive design tools. 4. Connect to analytics tools like GA4 and SEMrush. And 5. Manage your client's social media all from one dashboard. Ready for more? Go to wixstudio.com. That's wixstudio.com.
How did I know one of the keys of email marketing is the list. So what are some ways you honed the list or worked with the other marketer on your team to make sure they're collecting the right data or the right type of thing so you could do your job better?
Yeah, we had a template in place. So if we went to any sort of event and we collected information, it always had to follow that template just so we had the right fields in place. But interest area was key because if we didn't know the sport or the product they were interested in, we couldn't put them in the respective lists that made sense for them. We did have a general campaign, but again, personalization I think is key to conversion. So we really tried to be as personalized as we could. And location, which wasn't as huge of a deal at something like IMG Academy, just because it is one location. But I would say that location is crucial for most companies. So you can be more targeted, whether it's for your send time based on time zone or if you're going to be having events in different places. I think that's important.
Yeah. I actually think, I mean, I could see like location coming into play where you run, there's like last minute spots at a camp and you want to target people around IMG Academy and not someone in California that might be interested in coming to IMG Academy.
We absolutely did that, especially for our adult program. We had an adult program which was much smaller than the junior and youth programs, but we would definitely run localized offers for tennis and golf.
I want to, one part I'm also interested for people who can learn from your experience of starting a passion project that was about tennis and writing that became job. How did you? How did people find out about you, and how did you network your way into like USTA and then IMG Miami Open, and then IMG Academy? What are some things you did to take those steps?
Yeah, absolutely. USTA was just one of the companies that I was applying to jobs when I was still in college. I think that just goes back to being incredibly driven and ambitious. And I wanted to find a job before graduation. And I wanted it to be in something that I was super passionate and interested in. And USTA obviously aligned with that. So I had a couple of connections. I had a lot of internships while I was in college. Some of them were in media departments during professional tennis tournaments. So I wouldn't say that those led directly to my job with USTA, but they couldn't have hurt. I didn't know anyone there specifically, but having more references is obviously better than none. Um, Miami Open, I did not have any connections at IMG for that. I just applied and I'm thankful that my resume stood out. But then when it comes to IMG Academy, that was a connection that I actually made because I interviewed that team when I had started tennis itinerary. So that was when my full circle moment truly started, was getting a full-time role based on just a cold email that I sent saying, "Hey, I'm running a tennis blog," that probably no one had heard about at the time, and it ended up leading me to a full-time career.
I know I'm kind of pivoting all over the place, but one thing I'm also interested in is when you do interviews as a journalist and you're writing something, what is your process of getting the information you need to write that article or that email? Because journalists think way differently than just average writers. So I want people to know like the process of how you actually interviewed these people, and then how did you take that interview and make it into the final product.
I always start with doing a lot of research. There's a lot of information out there already, but I always want to try to make my content stand out from what you can just Google and find out in the first couple of minutes. So I try to do the research and then really build off of that. So maybe I know someone played a sport or started a certain company, but I want to really get the ins and outs of that. So just trying to kind of weave through and really just put out a product that you can't find just by a quick Google search. That's typically my first strategy. And then obviously sending questions over email is incredibly easy, but I think in person, and that was what I was doing with tennis itinerary, was the in-person interviews, and kind of like you're doing where you're building off of the answers. That was really something that I pride myself on, was building off of what they said and not just going through my list. Sometimes I threw out my list after the second question. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what people, I think people forget that once you get an interview list and you get into talking to someone, that if you make it an actual conversation with them, you actually get more answers than if you went down your list. Obviously, there's some things that are crucial to get out of your list, maybe their background or a specific story or something about the amenities at the place you are going and what people can get. But other than that, you want it to feel as natural. And you said this earlier in the talk, but like as human as possible when you're writing. And the best way to do that is just talk to them as a human and talk to them, not go overly interviewing.
absolutely. And I also try to find something I can relate to them on, even if that's not tennis, but if they happen to be from a city where I just visited or they mention, a past place of employment that I have a connection to, I always try to grasp on to that because I think once you can relate to someone, it just helps it flow better.
What advice do you have for people that were in your shoes that want to connect passion and work together? What's some advice you have for that?
I would say go for it. It was a crazy whirlwind of a process. I had no background on websites. I had only my personal social media at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. If I had started the blog after working at a place like IMG Academy, I think it would have been a lot more successful, but looking back on it, I wouldn't have done it any differently. So I would say if there's something on your mind that you're really passionate about, depending on where you are in life, if you can put 100% of your time into that, I would say go for it and see where it goes. It might turn into something or it might completely pivot and work out in a whole new light, which is kind of what happened for me. But even just starting something on the side, I've never been someone who's just 9 to 5 closes my computer and like my brain really never turns off. So I love always working on something else. And I think there's just more time in the day than we know. So even just putting pen to paper and like I thought about tennis itinerary for so long. I didn't just open my computer and create it in 24 hours. I just kept ideating and that was just how it came to life. So
I also think there's something to do with. I mean, you played college tennis, which is arguably one of the hardest things to do because there's what, like 10 people on every team or less. So you're competing against so little amount of people and you have to go to school. So it's just that mentality of you've been grinding your whole life. So the grind of just working 9 to 5 is not something I try to explain this because I play college football. I try to explain it just like it never was a set time for me. It was always like I had to be on football mindset all day long. So it was never, hey, I have to be on from there. I have to be on all the time. Otherwise, I can like fall behind or someone else is going to beat me out. So you have to be on all the time, and then you go into the work world, which is so different where you like this set times, as these parameters, but as an athlete, it's hard to have such small parameters to do things. You're just competitive all the time. So you always want to beat people.
definitely. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I was always thinking one, if not 2 steps ahead. I'm in class, but I'm thinking about the next workout I have to be at, or I'm thinking about the match that I have to get to on the weekend and how am I going to make up the test that I'm missing on Friday. And I really do think so many of those skills translated into my professional career, time management, communication skills, organization, and again, just always going back to that competitive nature. And I never like to feel stagnant. And I think that is definitely because of my background in sports.
And I also think the best marketers have that competitive spirit on it. I mean, you were said this at the beginning too, that you were like it gave you that fire, like you probably had in tennis when you saw sales coming in, and you were just like, how could I do this better and better each time so I can get more and more sales? And that's like something you learn from that competitive spirit you had playing sports. So
Yeah, I used to hate analytics when I was asked for reports. That was the bane of my existence, but I really did grow to love it just because when you analyze what you're doing, that's actually how you can improve in a different way than you maybe wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't have seen like, oh, this is actually working on this day versus this day when we've been sending the emails, for example. So
I mean, and you probably, I mean, did it subconsciously when you played sports. I mean, tennis is a lot of like analyzing opponents, how many times they hit to the back end versus the forehand, how many times their first serve does this versus that, how many times their second serve, and you're just like analyzing, and then you go in real time and you just have to analyze in real time, and that's kind of like marketing in a nutshell. It's like pre-planning, but things going to hit the fan when you do real things, and you just have to figure it out. I mean, and that's tennis and marketing together. So um,
that's so true. Yeah, you have a game plan going in, but second game, they're playing out of their mind, or a shot that you thought wasn't good is actually incredible, and you have to completely change your strategy.
what is a marketing hill you would die on?
I still love long form writing. Even though I do so much less of it, I just don't think it's going away. I know newspapers and magazines maybe aren't doing as well, but I still love the feeling of just picking up a newspaper or a magazine really from time to time and just reading like a physical copy. So I think there's a time and a place for that for
I
sure.
honestly think, I mean, I have this theory that like I do think attention spans are shrinking a little bit, but I do think that we as consumers of content are just really good at filtering out bad content now. But if you're really good at writing long form, people still read all 7 books of Harry Potter, or they still read The Lord of the Rings, or they still watch binge a whole TV show, and that's hours and hours and hours. So I think if you know are a good writer and know how to keep people's attention, you can long form works. I think long form doesn't work if you're not good at writing long form, and that's what you should stick at writing short form copy until you get. But like if you're good at writing long form, even like the best like copywriters said like put as much as in there to sell a product, and it could be short if it's there's not that much, but you could write this long form piece, and if you can keep people's attention for a long time and you're good at it, write the longer piece of content. So
Totally. I think it depends when you have someone too. If someone's just scrolling, you're not really engaged. They're just looking for the first thing that catches their eye. But if I'm really seeking out something or I want to know more than beyond the headline, I'll seek out a long form piece of content because I actually want to read and understand. Because headlines are catchy and that's what they're for, but they don't give you the full story. And that's where long form can really fill in those gray areas.
yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, there's a time and a place for every form of writing. So I think people read books, but also if you're trying to sell something, it's probably better to do short form. So it's like depending on what the medium and um, what you're trying to do, the end goal of the piece of copy is a time and a place for both. But I don't think like short form or long form is better than one another. That's what I think. People always argue like short form is better, but it's for some mediums it's better, but sometimes long form is better if you're good at it. So, uh, lastly, is where could people find what you're doing and anything else like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's just my first name, Jordana.Klein, my last name. Also pretty active on LinkedIn. Um, and I don't have my personal blog is still under construction, but I work with some clients. One of them that I'm super passionate about that kind of was where a tennis itinerary really came to life because I'm working for the company that I ultimately wanted to work for way back then is Tennis Resorts Online. So I'm a travel editor um, for that company, and we just launched some Wimbledon travel packages. So a lot of cool things going on there, and it's kind of where I've been able to put all those passions back into a company that already existed.
Is that the one that comes up with like the yearly like top 100
Mm-hmm.
tennis. Yeah, I seen
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Well, that's cool. I mean, congrats on that. And also, it's cool that you're sticking to your passion and doing marketing. I think a lot of people are probably envious of that are listening right now, but it's cool that I think it always starts with expertise, and you proved your expertise by doing the tennis itinerary, and that snowballed to everything else. So,
Definitely learned the business acumen along the way, but the underlying passion for sports and tennis is always there. So it's been awesome.
well, thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it too.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.